Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Grow Your Path to Wellness. In case you missed it last week, our guest was Jean Roberts, and we talked all about women in leadership and the different challenges and adversities that we face along our paths towards positions in wellness or in leadership. But, So joining us this week is Griffin Brown. So we will be talking about how to make a successful and lasting change. So welcome, Griffin.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Thank you for being here. So if you don't mind, just go ahead and give us a quick introduction, maybe a little bit about your background and what you're doing right now.
Yeah, so my name's Griffin Brown. I have a counseling practice down at Merriman Valley, 1720 Merriman Road. I'm a licensed independent social worker, and just really got into the field just to help people succeed in their definition of success, feel happy, just really have a passion for helping people and working collaboratively. I just have so much fun with that. Personally just really enjoy like fitness and just eating a lot of good foods and just having fun basically. Went to Akron for school and kind of settled in here the last 10 years.
Yeah, we have listeners from all over. So I'm glad that you said Akron, Ohio, because you don't know where people are listening from. So yeah, I don't know if we were in the same cohort. We might have been like a cohort behind, I think maybe, or day and night or something like that. But yeah, we did the same program.
2013. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, so you, when we reached out to you months ago, we kind of said, hey, pick a topic, and you were like, how about successfully making a change? What makes it so difficult for people to make a change? Why was that a good topic that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, I think just because when I talk to anyone, like myself included, I think there's just all aspects of our lives like we'd like to see differently, or something we could do that would make us happier, or perhaps like improve our functioning. Whether that's like reducing distress or just enhancing something. I think like we're all pursuing ways to just feel better, feel happier. So I think that often entails a change. And so I thought that'd be a good topic to choose because it kind of touches so many different aspects.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What do you typically see makes it hard for people? Like what gets in the way of them successfully making a change?
I think sometimes there's a lot of ambivalence, or it's like, someone is wondering, like, is this worth changing? I think a lot of times there's like, what often it comes down to is like belief in one's ability to make a change. Like someone might have an idea, but they like really don't have the confidence to do so. Or like they anticipate like how difficult it could be to do that and kind of put up barriers. And I think like a lot of time, like we all can like underestimate the environment and its influence on our change. Like, whether it's working a lot, or like if your change was related to food, like, with the holidays, how do you pass up all these good cookies, little things like that.
Yeah, like I think there's a whole bunch that goes into that. Everything, like you said, it's almost like a self-sabotage, and then how ready are we and kind of where are we at in our, stage of life and environment. It's kind of a kind of picture for sure.
Yeah, I was just talking to somebody about this other day in a session. He was kind of getting bummed out on himself. He's like, I told my wife I'm finally coming to therapy, and she was like, is it helping? Because I'm not noticing anything. And he was like, yeah, I think it's helping. I think it's just me getting in the way. Like she does give me things to do, and I think I don't know. I don't know what the issue is with me following through. And so I had to educate him on good old Prochaska's stages of change. And, I always give a prime example because I'm still there with it, but no matter what it is in life that you want to change, any decision, right? Like I've been saying probably for at least the past 10 years, I want to get up in the morning and give myself 10 minutes to just do yoga. 10 minutes of yoga in the morning. I'm not there yet. I'm still not doing it 10 years later. And so if I beat myself up over that every day about how I'm not doing it, that doesn't help me move forward. I just give myself some grace. And I said, well, I at least stretched this morning when I got up, and I'm still going to work toward that goal. So I try to educate people. It doesn't matter whether you think about changing a job or starting to eat a little better or change your friend group or whatever it is, those decisions take time. you know?
Absolutely. I like how you kind of shifted, like looking at like what you did do successfully. Like I think a lot of us could benefit from that.
Yeah, we're all so hard on ourselves, and
a lot of gratitude.
Yeah.
In mind. Yeah. Like, okay, what have we done? And like maybe we haven't completely, because we get so focused on what's my end goal that we lose, you know, the process that leads all the way up to reaching the end goal. And then like, what am I grateful for along the way? Has seemed to help kind of redirect that path of thinking from, you know, what have I not done, or what can I not do right now?
Yeah, give yourself the benefit. Oh, I'm sorry. I was just gonna say, give yourself the benefit of getting a little dopamine hit for what you did do, you know, right? Because I always give people the example, like if your best friend or whoever decided they were gonna go climb, you know, Mount Kilimanjaro, and you're like, oh, okay, I'll be there to cheer you on. And the whole time they're climbing, you're like, man, you're not doing it right. You should have did it this way. You didn't buy the right shoes. You're not going fast enough. Like that doesn't help you get to your goal, right? So you got to give yourself a little grace and cheer yourself on along the way.
Absolutely.
So
I think, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask you, what do you feel like are some extra, like with the current pandemic that feels like it's never ending, what kind of impact do you feel like that's, you know, putting on individuals who are trying to, or interested or want to make a change right now?
Yeah, so I think there's two sides to it. Like, I think there's certainly some barriers that have been put up. Like, I think like if a lot of people do value like in-person interactions, and there's definitely some barriers there. Like if someone like wanted to meet, like let's say they wanted to improve their finances, wanted to meet with an advisor, maybe they have to do that by Zoom or Skype now instead, or like they wanted to see their therapist. And like a lot of times people they're mindful of the pandemic and are meeting online. So I think it's like, again, like reshifting, like what can we do? And how can we adapt to that? And like look at all the improved like access we do have in certain areas. Like I think it's really positive how much we've adapted as a country just to be able to log in and have a therapy session, or like meet with a doctor online, or like how many coaching programs, or like any program you name it is basically a click of a button away. And I think like when we talk about environment, that removes so many barriers. Like if you're going to travel, you have to drive to go somewhere for 20 minutes after you're working all day. I could totally see why someone would be more likely to just hop online in the comfort of their own living room and doing whatever it may be, you know?
Yeah, I've noticed like some of my clients who, because I'm doing both, I just have a pretty strict, like in person and telehealth, but I have a pretty strict, you know, safety protocol and everything. And I've had some that I've been noticing, even though they, you know, starting out, they primarily said they wanted to see me in person. I was like, all right, great. And we did that, but then they kind of trickled into like, maybe something came up and we had to adapt and do telehealth. Maybe I've had a couple of exposures to COVID in the past, and I was like, I can't come in. And then they try that kind of adaptation of telehealth, and now it's like, you know, telehealth is good next week. Even like, we'll do that instead, because they can, you know, they feel a lot safer and they've adapted to it now.
Yeah.
They were resistant to it in the beginning. So.
Yeah. And maybe like, I think some people are noticing like an increase in some time. Like a lot of people are still extremely busy, but if you're not able to like go to restaurants or do all these other things, it's like kind of open up people's schedules more.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then I think, Kelsi, that just goes back to like stages of change, right? Like, I don't know. I don't think I'm really ready for that. And like discomfort and fear of what that might mean. And I'd just rather see you in person. But once it's forced upon you for whatever reason, I've had the same situation. Like people insisted in person. And then once we did telehealth, they're like, actually, this was pretty okay. I kind of like this, you know? And we've talked in other episodes about the benefits. Yeah, like you get to see each other's environments, you get to see each other's pets, like it's more humanizing. And yeah. Anything else on that, Griffin, like as far as the pandemic and, you know, specifically with your clients' abilities to make a change?
Yeah, I mean, so I think like maybe across the board, I think everyone's mental health is like, if you like look at it on a 10-point scale, when you can't do everything you used to do, probably took a couple steps down. So it's like, I think with people who are bordering on mental health issues, like this kind of has been a big challenge. So like, I think there is that impact of like belief in one's ability or like to make these changes, and like more like anxiety or depression perhaps being a barrier that maybe wouldn't always be so pronounced or get in the way. Just because our lives have all been kind of changed very drastically in a short time.
Yes.
Yeah.
All the different, like you said, all of those changes. And then, you know, for some, it being, we have the pandemic in the heart of winter time, depending on where we live. I know that I have multiple people who are struggling with like the change in seasons and their mood. And then like a lot of the loneliness triggered by the pandemic, feeling less connected. And that in itself, if we feel like we're alone, it's the last thing we really feel like doing is making and setting goals towards change. We just, because we're wired for connection. So I see a lot of loneliness right now.
Yeah.
In the pandemic.
Mm-hmm. But I also think there's like a prime opportunity. Like if we have an extra hour a day, like we can learn about anything. We have the luxury of time. So just like try to like shift to that positive about it.
Yeah, all about perspective and mindset, which we've definitely talked about many times too. So, you know, given the current state, how can we improve our motivation and action toward change? You know, pre-pandemic, non-pandemic, like what are some skills or things people can do to improve their motivation?
I like to think asking ourselves, like, are we really happy? Like categorically. I also think like we can break down like broad areas of our life. And I think that can like sometimes be where a lot of us get stuck, where we might look at like, okay, my social well-being, my physical well-being, spiritual, you name it. But we don't always necessarily define what aspect, what behavior or part of that like we'd like to work on. And it's kind of just like, yeah, I'd like to feel better. And it's left at that. But I think it's like, what little behaviors can we implement in that to improve that area? I think a good skill is like, can we rate that 1 to 10, like 10 being like totally satisfied, 1 not at all, and just kind of get a baseline. Yeah, what, do you guys have any thoughts on that?
Well, I love that you
wellness, huh?
Yeah, I was like 8 dimensions of wellness. We talk about this all day.
I just probably went through it with 2 or a minimum of 2 clients just last week. I've been doing that a lot. It helps you get, like you said, Griffin, you break down your life, because it can feel so overwhelming and you have a very broad concept or thing you would like to see change, but it's those 8 dimensions, they overlap so much of our life, like you said, physical, spiritual, emotional, social. So then kind of stepping outside of that and looking at each dimension individually, it's like, I'm pretty strong in this area. I'm pretty strong in my emotional dimension, but my physical health, that's where I think is impacting me wanting to feel better. I think it's physically I want to feel better. And then you can really, hone in and target once you get a little bit more specific on where you feel like that's coming from.
Yeah. Yeah, and perhaps like you could leverage that one area to help the others,
Yes.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that, like you said, Kelsi, those areas bleed so much. And oftentimes I see work, we live in, I was so used to saying 2020 America. We live in 2021 America, yet we have such primal bodies and brains. And so America, or, whatever other fast-paced country, I'm assuming it's just us, other ones are a little nicer, wire you to go, achieve, do. And so it almost makes you feel selfish, or it's unusual to step back and look at yourself and what you want. And so often I see people's work just tearing down the other areas, right? Well, I have to work. I have to check these emails. So they're not sleeping. They're not eating right. They're not talking to their friends. They're not working out. They're not, because work, right? So I think it's really, like you said, Griffin, it's stepping back and saying like, what do you want? Are you happy? Like, yeah, you got a paycheck, but then you have to live in this body the rest of your life that you're not working. So maybe a career shift is what we need to do, right? Maybe that toxic work environment is what's bleeding into it. Or every time you hang out with this group of friends, you come back feeling really anxious and overwhelmed. So maybe that's the shift. Or yeah, I love talking about those. And I think just psychoeducation in general, because we always talk about, you know, we're getting better, but you weren't handed out coping skills or education about mental health in school and kindergarten. So I think just a lot of education is helpful for people too.
Yeah.
I've noticed during this pandemic, like to kind of keep, you know, I'm working that in there. Like what I've been seeing a lot is I'm hearing less with my clients, like that dialogue of or narrative. This is what I need to do. I need to be doing this, this, and this, and this. And usually I'm a pretty needs-based clinician, but I've been noticing lately myself as a clinician needing to adapt and ask people like, because I feel so many of being in that fight or flight, I just need to focus on survival, and we lose all of the wants. Like, what do I want right now? Like, and reminding us like, okay, my needs are met. I'm okay, but my wants are really lacking. And I think that's a big thing I've noticed within the last probably 6 months for sure.
Yeah, and like how often, like, have you guys seen maybe clients, like they start to focus on those wants or what they feel like are wants, and that really increases like their ability to do those perceived needs. Like I always get such a joy out of seeing.
Oh, I feel like more recharged and refueled. So like I feel better going to work or, you know, this or that. And I'm like,
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes, they go hand in hand, and we have to have a little bit of both.
It brought something to mind and then I lost it.
Oh, it helps that I keep talking over you today.
No, it's okay. It's okay. We can move on.
How can this understanding of change, you know, like the breaking it down, being realistic with ourselves, being compassionate, and giving ourselves credit for the things that we have accomplished along the way, just that broad understanding, how can that help us, and not just us as professionals, but our listeners, understand others or be there for others right now and change?
Yeah, so I think I guess if that's applied to helping other people, I think it's like giving everybody, like, you know, we talk about accepting people unconditionally. I think that's a big part of it. Certainly if someone's giving themselves credit, like, you know, giving them praise, because like when it's good to like have that internally, but like when you hear that from others, like that's definitely going to be a boost. Like if you notice someone has been working really hard and you see a change, like I think that just propels people forward when they know someone out there saw that.
Yes.
You know, and maybe if they're trying to work on something that you happen to know something about, you could like offer to help or join them in that change. You know, this in Akron, Ohio, it has not been too bad of a winter. Like, could you like walk with someone at lunch? Like if you just wanted to get in 10 extra minutes of exercise, could that give you some time just to clear your head with someone you really like? I just think like people can kind of propel forward with each other.
Yeah, and I love when I meet with people and they do their own work and then they start to see things in other people, right? Like they start to see the cognitive distortions, or they start to see the trauma responses, or they start to see the anxiety symptoms. And just that empathy and like genuine understanding is so helpful for just being with other people rather than projecting onto them or looking through a lens of what they need to be doing or how they're harming me. It's like, okay, that behavior is not okay toward me, and I'm going to set the boundary. And I kind of understand where that's coming from. I remembered what I was going to say, Kelsi. When you said need to be, I often stop people when they say, I should be. I should be doing this.
Yesterday on the should thinking.
Yeah, I'm like, should? I don't like that. If it's a should, it's probably a critical parent voice. It's probably a societal voice, sometimes a religious trauma voice. So I always like to help people shift from should to want, like you said, want. What do I feel in my body? Does that feel right to me when I say should? Ugh, it probably makes me tense up. I don't know how much mind body stuff you do, Griffin, but we love talking about, like, where do you feel that in your body?
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Yeah. I think that is so overlooked.
Yeah, I think should thinking definitely applies to today's topic. And I see it, the should thinking also hits me as very strongly tied with like expectations and less of a focus on intention. I do a lot of that kind of shift with my clients, like, because expectations I feel like are more external and like a lot less out of our control. And then we're like always trying to meet expectations of us. So I like to redirect and go in intention route, like setting your intention for that journey for change, or, you know, what's my intention going into this new activity for myself, you know, or if that makes sense.
Yeah. And yeah, kind of like, and we talk about just kind of like mindset or cognitive distortions, like when we, and like applying this to others and ourselves, like I think a lot of people get caught up in that all or nothing approach, like, you know, categorically as something as success or failure. Yes. I mean, I can rarely think of things that are absolute success or failure. And like, I think like, say someone, yeah, again, like just a walking example, if someone missed 2 days, like, did you really fail your goal to walk 7 days, or did you succeed 5 times? It's like,
right.
People can give other people that benefit of the doubt sometimes, but I think people get caught up in like themselves, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that was part of my conversation with my person too. Like, I just want to get up and like, there's no excuse. I don't know why I can't get up and do 30 or 45 minutes on the Peloton. I'm like, okay, do you think you could maybe get like a 5-minute walk up and down the street in, or maybe you could like go up and down your stairs a couple times in the house that day? Like, and I even like assess that, like, do you feel like this is an all or nothing? Like either I do the 45 minutes or I don't do anything at all. And they're like, yeah. And I don't know, you know, like I said, is it societal? Is it parent? What is it? Where is it coming from? But just throw that in the trash. What right. Can I do?
Not serving that's a good purpose anymore.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's definitely, I see as a barrier for change, if we're talking about change, because then I see a lot of times people give up because they're like, well, I didn't do the 7 days of walking and clearly I can't do that. So I'm going to beat myself up about it and I'm just not going to bother because that doesn't work for me. Rather than maybe I should start out at 2 days. And if I go 3, yay, I went over my goal, you know?
Mm-hmm. You ask that good old question too. My clients, they know it's coming now. Like they can like predict whenever Kelsi's getting ready to say the friend question. I'm like, okay, if you had a friend that was in this situation, what would your dialogue be with them about it? And they're like, fine. Yes, I would tell them, like, it's fine. You did something. Like, you need to give yourself credit for that. Like, you can try again tomorrow. It's not all out the window. And like,
yeah.
But like you said, Griffin, it's a lot different. Our own limiting belief and all of those roots that Amanda was pinpointing is a lot different internally until we address it.
Yeah, and I think often, like, sometimes we can get caught up in like what our perception is ahead of time of like how, like, whatever we're doing. Maybe it's like just the idea of doing that can be a lot more intimidating than the actual experience. And there's times where it can be really difficult, but I think there's just that wall before. It's like, can you experiment with doing this for a day or a week? How bad is it? I mean, we can always shift gears here. But I think it's like kind of going back to the almost like self-sabotage idea. Like, is this as bad as we think it's going to be? Mm-hmm. If it may be, is there ways we can, I guess, tap in others to help us or other tools we can use to move forward?
Yes.
That's my favorite quote. It always seems impossible until it's done. Mm-hmm. And so often our survival, again, we're very primal beings. Our survival says anything that's uncomfortable, that's a lion in front of me. Right? Like walking 10 minutes a day. Oh my gosh, that's terrifying. We don't like cognitively are aware of that, but our body is. So our body's like, no, let's not do that. But once you do it, you feel good. You release endorphins, right? You get the dopamine and the serotonin and you're like, that's actually pretty good. kind of like that. So I think you're right. You're exactly right. You just almost got to do it. And then, okay, if it was terrible, you don't ever have to do it again, but at least you know, right?
Yeah. And if it was terrible, what was terrible about that? Like, how can we improve on that?
Pivot. How can we pivot it?
Yeah, the all or nothing. Like, okay, maybe it wasn't all bad, so maybe we can make it, modify it for us to be a better fit. What was my expectation going into it? And then how do I, because our brain, if there's something, like everything we do is not going to be joyful. We all know that. But are there ways that I can modify it for myself where it can actually like bring me joy, to where I don't, because we're less likely to be successful if we're going to absolutely dread every minute of whatever it is. So I'm like, really pay attention to yourself and what would be enjoyable for you, and if there is a way of incorporating some of that.
Yeah, and I think it often kind of brings up a question of like, the pursuit of like short-term happiness versus long-term happiness. And, we can, and there's, I think both definitely have a place, but sometimes like that can help be really motivating. If there's something you have to do that feels like a chore or a commitment, but like internally, like you just feel so good that you're pursuing something that you really value, is consistent with how you are or how you want to be. I think that can be really powerful and like a huge motivator.
Yeah, I like to frame that as like short-term consequence, long-term benefit.
Yeah.
And I see what you were talking about, Kelsi, with when I recommend mindfulness, often people will come back and they're like, I tried to do that meditation thing and I just couldn't do it because my mind just got too distracted, and I don't know, I don't want to do that. And I'm like, okay, wait, that's one way. There's like so many other ways. So let's talk about how we can pivot the mindfulness tool for you, right? Or like if people have children and families, I'm like, okay, let's get your kids involved, right? Like, because then it becomes a family activity. You're going to feel good that you're giving them a healthy coping skill. And you don't just have to sit there and pretend like you're Buddha, because you're not. You were born in America, right? And we don't have that same sort of ability to just bring our awareness to the breath. So that's a good example I like to use.
And educating ourselves, because if somebody doesn't have a therapist and somebody to guide them through this process, I think really looking into like different methods, like, okay, this is the change that I want to make, but how are other people doing it? Reaching, like, not just supports, but kind of educating, and what does that process look like for somebody else? What helped them? And because us being therapists, like, we can educate people and say, no, mindfulness isn't just for, the goal isn't to quiet your mind and stop thoughts. It's to do this and this and this. But I think, and I always say education can make us feel very empowered and more motivated, because then we feel like we have more of a toolbox going into it. Like if somebody's never been to a gym, I see that a lot. They're like terrified to go into a gym for all the reasons that we won't go into today. But I tell them, like, find some like fitness accounts online, or look up some different things going into it that will make you feel a little bit more confident going into it. Motivation and confidence can come from teaching ourselves a little bit before we go and jump into it.
Griffin, thank you so much for being here. Do you have any last minute thoughts on the subject, or anything you want to leave our listeners with, given the time this episode's going to be going out? Do you have any favorite sayings or little tips of advice or anything?
I guess like with this whole idea of making a change, like just to kind of summarize, like I think it's just really important to look at like what you could gain from it, not necessarily what you're depriving yourself of or what you're giving up, but just what is there to gain, and just trying it out, seeing how it goes. And I think breaking these things down to something very small and manageable. You don't, like, Rome wasn't built in a day. Like you can just, implement these things slowly. And I think oftentimes like clients or anyone in general can be really surprised what just one small thing can really do, and it can really build momentum. And I think at the end of the day, like, don't be afraid to fail. I think sometimes coming up, like what one would call short, can be a huge opportunity to learn. And I think that shows the courage to be operating out of an area where like you're taking a risk to better yourself or in your situation. And I think like the ability to like face that head on is like just shows so much strength. And there could be huge opportunity to grow from that. That's what I really like to talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah. I like the term mistakes, because we can't learn unless we make them, right? So, you know, and if you just look back on your life at any point, you know, where you didn't take, whether it was a parent or a friend or a coworker's advice, and then something happened and you were like, okay, I'm willing to be a little more open now and listen to others. Maybe I don't know everything, or, you know, we all have to learn through not doing it, quote unquote, the best way. I was going to say right, but the best way the first time, right? You don't learn if you can't grow that way. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I guess like there's just so many resources out there to help, no matter what category it is. There's help out there in so many different ways to get from point A to point B.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think a lot of times we feel so lonely, we forget that. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you again so much for being here. You can, if you want to, text me over, like if you have a link for your, you know, your Psychology Today or your practice or whatever, we can definitely link that in the show notes, Griffin. Awesome. We're really excited. You can come back anytime and talk about a different topic if you want to. Just let us know.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun. Thank you.
You're welcome. So don't forget to like, comment, subscribe to all of our audience so you don't miss out on the most upcoming podcasts. And next week, I will be the guest. I'm going to be talking about finding your path in life, which is a super exciting thing for me. Took me a long time to get there myself. So I'm excited about that one. Thanks for tuning in, guys. We will see you next week. Bye.
All right, bye.
Bye. Take care.